We all suspect what AAA studios really think of us. The disdain bubbles just beneath the surface. In baffling design decisions, heavy-handed lectures dressed up as story, and the creeping sense that these games just aren't made for us anymore. But every once in a while, the mask slips. The carefully curated PR filter drops, and the quiet part gets said out loud. David Gator, former lead writer at BioWare, gave us exactly such a moment in a recent interview with Games Radar. He was speaking about the attitudes held by executives and higher-ups during Veilguard's development. Quote, "The nerds were in the cave. You made an RPG, and the nerds in the cave would always show up. You didn't have to try and appeal to them. You had to worry about the people who weren't in the cave." Close quote. Now, to be clear, this isn't Gator's view. It's the view he spent years pushing back against. Gator saw what should have been obvious, that the very mechanics leadership saw as slow and cumbersome were the same ones that made Dragon Age beloved in the first place. Naturally, his protests were ignored. He was making too much sense. Still, it's a striking thing to hear out loud. Not because it's surprising, but because it confirms what many players have long felt. That the people making these games often see their most loyal fans not as collaborators or supporters, but as an afterthought. You can see the consequences of this mindset all over Anthem. A studio once known for rich characters, branching narratives, and meaningful player choice tried to reinvent itself as a live service looter shooter, a genre it neither understood nor respected. Gone were the dialogue wheels, companion loyalty arcs, or even basic narrative cohesion. What replaced them was a glossy shell tracing trends, not passion. It didn't just alienate longtime fans, it made clear they were never the priority. And incredibly, even after Anthem, they did it again. Dragon Age the Veilguard was pitched as a return to form, but what fans got instead felt like the final severing of BioWare from its identity. The name alone hinted at the shift, dropping Dreadwolf in favor of something safer, broader, and brand-friendly. What followed was a game that ditched basically every element that made the franchise successful in the first place. The characters were preachy, the combat was stripped of depth, and the tone was less Origins and more Saturday morning cartoon. The result? A critical and commercial failure. Not because gamers weren't interested in playing Dragon Age, but because BioWare abandoned what made it great. And BioWare isn't alone in this miscalculation. It's an industry-wide affliction. The Saints Row reboot wore its own legacy like a costume. Volition took a beloved franchise known for absurd, irreverent humor and tried to sanitize it, chasing broader appeal by abandoning everything that made it unique. The result wasn't just a flop, it destroyed the studio entirely, with Volition closing its doors shortly after launch. Concord launched as trailer bait. Vague concept art, quippy voice lines, and a generic sci-fi aesthetic clearly assembled in a boardroom rather than a writer's room. And Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League felt like a complete misreading of its own studio's strengths, chasing trends instead of honoring what made Arkham great. They didn't build on what made them successful. They chased the real-life equivalent of an infinite money glitch. These failures aren't just missteps, they're patterns. The AAA industry keeps making the same wrong assumptions about players, about what sells, and about what matters. Somewhere along the way, they stopped trusting the player. They stopped believing we could handle complexity, that we could follow nuance, and that we even wanted to be challenged. But it's not merely a lack of trust. It's a failure of imagination. They've abandoned gamers to chase an imaginary audience. Players who want a fantasy RPG without complicated systems, a story-driven game without too much emotional depth, or a strategy title without complexity. people who want everything and nothing all at once. And in chasing this phantom market, they alienate the fans who actually exist, the ones who loved these genres before they were profitable. And that's the real heartbreak. AAA studios have the teams, the tools, and the talent to make unforgettable games. But they've convinced themselves that players are a problem to be solved, not people to be inspired. So they aim low. They build for trailers rather than for people. But if you want to see what's still possible, what it looks like when a game is made with trust, vision, and respect, you don't need to look far. Chants of Sonar trusts players to decode a language from scratch, without hints or tutorials. It challenges you to think like an archaeologist, not just a gamer. It doesn't hold players' hands or suffocate you with unwanted advice. It trusts players enough to offer the simple joy of discovery. Hyper Light Drifter tells its story entirely without words, and somehow it's more emotionally resonant than a dozen overwritten cutscenes. It builds an emotional world entirely through suggestion and mood, and shows that subtlety can be more powerful than exposition. Sea of Stars could have been a shallow retro cash-in. Instead, it delivers deep mechanics, heartfelt storytelling, and stunning pixel art, all while honoring the genre's roots. It proves that nostalgia and innovation aren't mutually exclusive. They're allies when used with care. And most recently, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, shows that you don't have to choose between style and substance. It's beautiful and bold, with ambitious combat and world design to match. It blends turn-based combat with action mechanics like parry and dodge in a way few games have attempted. The result could easily have felt gimmicky, another flashy twist meant to distract from shallow systems. But it doesn't. It works because the game is confident in its identity. Every mechanic feels like it belongs, reinforcing the world's tension and pace instead of breaking it. These aren't just good games. They're case studies in what the industry used to value: carefully tuned mechanics, a distinct creative voice, and a willingness to trust the player. Their success is a quiet rebuke to everything AAA has forgotten. Proof that avoiding the AAA formula isn't a liability, it's the reason they thrive. And that contrast forces an uncomfortable question. If small teams can build brilliant games with limited budgets and total creative freedom, what's stopping AAA? It's not that AAA studios can't make great games anymore. It's that they've convinced themselves we're not worth the risk.